meeting is being recorded. The account owner can watch. This meeting is being
recorded.
Zoom.
Okay. So the context is a place called Honeydew, which now is mostly a bunch of sort of cluster homes and things. But at the time it was a group of small holdings, or they were called plots. So it was it's a semi-rural kind of setting, which I grew up in, with dirt roads and cows and horses and so on. Some of them very run down, I guess. But the city was sort of there, several kilometers or a few kilometers away, you'd hit the tarred roads and so on. And I mean, that's really just that's only the context I think that you need to know. I talk about an office in the one place, which was an office on the plot where I lived, where my grandparents produced a religious magazine. So these are narrative poems. They're a bit slightly different to some of the stuff I've written before. So, I thought I would use this as an opportunity to read them. It is a manuscript that's almost done, which I hope to get published. So I'm just going to go read them. I mean, some of them are quite long. I've been told I've got 30 minutes, so I have timed it. So this does take 30 minutes. Okay. And you can follow there is a PDF there if you want to follow in there. All right, let's see how it goes. The first one is called Barbed Wire. Mr. Stemmett's tractor grumbled up and down these rows of peach trees, across the dangling barbed wire that ran its rusted splinters between the plots, as if to say roughly, here. Beneath the creaking of the pines, I watched his tractor go up and down through swollen ground. We had peaches too in our backyard, like thick red teardrops. Our lemons were bright as coaky suns above the dry winter grass. My gran in Durban, who was visiting, collected apricots in her apron that had tumbled to the ground and boiled them on the gas stove. The jars burst in the kitchen with apricot eyelids and stew pips. Up near the pump house, the mulberries bled their peppercorns, and further down, a bitter apple tree leaned with its chapped elbows on the paddock fence. Ma said the oranges were too sour to eat, so they stiffened on the branches, mouldering on one side like old planets. But we had plums and figs and guavas bursting beneath the bathroom window in a bed of mud and light. The grapes clung to their wire nest, a sky shooting through the vine, until someone burnt it down. My uncle, Ma said quietly, as if a little unsure if she missed the grapes. When winter came, my gran next door packed Mrs. Stemmett some old clothes and invited her for dinner. Bring the kids. As a young woman, she worked a cafe till. There were always ghosts in her house. When things got tough, she plucked the chickens, her arms swelling. When he was still a boy, my uncle, born years after his two brothers, sat alone in the chicken hock with his red hair, the chickens clucking around him, the hissing of eggs. There was no one to save him. Mr. Stemmett was a professor at university, economics or chemistry, I think. One night, my dad watched him jump the only stop street on the way home. Drunk, looking for relief, he didn't see it coming. The barbed wire and the cosmos stopped him. Where am I? He said, dazed, as my dad helped him out his tangled car. His kids, Afrikaans, like lots of plot kids, were a bit odd, my ma's words. They watched me ride my wooden go-kart my dad had hammered together for me with old lawnmower wheels. Can you borrow it to me? The eldest said, and they took it back with them, stepping across the rusted barbed wire, into a land of thickening peaches, to a father with a problem, to a mother sighing to the bone. When they finally sold the plot to a nursery stockyard, I forget its name, the peach trees were ripped out, the nearby roads got tarred. Big trucks came with small trees. that was settled, waiting in long, hot rows. A sign was bolted at the gate. One afternoon, I watched the new boy marching up and down the lonely rows, practicing for cadets, red-faced, sweating in his brown beret and grey school shorts, saluting a sapling as he passed, stomping his right foot to halt, swiveling, stiff as a fork. Mr. Landman. Mr. Landman lived on the other side in a little red bricked house built from old railway house plans. He kept his barbed wire straight, but I only once saw someone tightening its branches, and I never saw anyone work his land. To step over there and slip along the artery of pines where the passers-by sometimes went, because it was easier to walk on his side down to the road, you had to grab the wire in the middle between two nests of spikes to push down as hard as you could and curve your back to avoid the barbs that waited above you with their grim stars. You kept your shadow close through the trail of pines so you could quickly slip back if Mr. Landman's dog noticed, which never did, but always seemed to. Mr. Landman's stoep was very quiet and was even quieter once Mrs. Landman died. But one spring, for some reason, he suddenly stepped out his little railway house in his khaki shorts and shirt and sun hat brimmed with the skin of a meerkat, his jaw like a shriveled peach that had been on the branch for a long time. He climbed onto his rusted tractor and kicked it into life and began to plough his dry earth back and forth, back and forth. He did this all day, as if in a trance, his thin arms burning up like sticks. Mejuffrouw Els. Mejuffrouw Els, I don't know why she was a miss because she was quite old, was the first team netball coach and trained school athletics. She arrived at school in white tackies with a clipboard sticking out to her basket, in tracksuit pants and a tracksuit zip-up top, her silver hair tongued up at the edges so it flared, a whistle tied tightly with a yellow ribbon to her wrist. It made her look like she wasn't really a teacher and longed, like most of us, for the end of class. The yellow meant she was Impala, one of the school houses, and the quickest on the track. The others were Kudu, green, Nyala, blue. I was Eland, a slow and deliberate bull. I was fast in grade 1 until young Hendrik overtook me. He would have been the fastest boy in school, but his ma flipped her car at the Trick Bend just down the road from us after the corrugations where the river sand started and the wattles gathered the dust. He came back to school weeks later with blotched cheeks, looking down at his shoes. Pittman van Rensburg was the fastest boy in school. He was in Impala and in Standard 5. Yolanda was the fastest girl. She was in Kudu, who always came nearly last. She huffed heavily as she passed, wheezing on the final bend of the 400 meters, each step planted into the ground, her hands out flat like a train to make her go a little faster. Mostly, I went stiff up inside when Miss Else was near, with her little silver whistle wound tightly round her wrist. She took us for substitution once. If the class got too noisy, she would shriek or blow a whistle, or do both. There wasn't much difference between her whistle and her shriek. Sometimes things got worse, my sister said, who had her for health, I think. If you stepped over the line where they poured the poison to kill the grass. One day I passed her class and through the window saw Miss Else shrieking close at the boy's face she had told to stand like a sergeant in an American army movie. He shrunk his shoulders from her shriek and clutched his dog-eared A4 book. And then she grabbed his book and chucked it to the floor and bashed his head against the wall. Quick, like the way you bounce a ball. So when Miss Else took us for substitution, I tried my best to get a desk in the middle of the class. She shrieked her whistle in the tiled classroom. She shrieked and shrieked it on the track, on the hot-baked netball court, where the girls puffed in their team bibs, as their tackies twisted and squeaked on the cracked cement, and the leather ball slapped hard into their raw hands. Up at the office. I worked up at the office after school. A toilet round the back for the blacks, and a toilet down the stairs inside. It had thick, damp walls and stoop-blood floors. A fan with green wings whirling its dust. Gran, in her office up a few bumpy steps, the scone of stone weighing down the glass cabinet behind her. A little green cash box with handwritten notes tucked under the money springs. She slid out the coins, counting each one with her lips. Her gold rings glittered on her fingers like stars. Down below, Miss Dory, with cloudy hair and puffed rose cheeks, friendly as an oven glove, started another story. Miss Phillips, in her net of veins, sat stiff as a top-secret secretary deciphering a code. She kept her wartime heels down. They separated the postage stamps with proteas on them, pasted down the brown flaps to the brown envelopes for posting out the magazine. Claire Mary was always, excuse me, Claire Mary was always in a rush. Her daughter had epilepsy. She went into a trance and her arms lifted up at her sides, was how it was explained to me. Her son, Sean, was a parabat, and his name drifted down the TV screen when his helicopter was hit at the border. She wore a smudged rubber thimble on one finger. Naya clacked out the addresses on the electric typewriter, looked aside at the handwritten list, then lifted the bail to check what she'd typed. Across the concrete pathway that kept the mud down, Grandad beckoned me in. To his new prefabricated study, set apart from the rest. After years of him hidden in the back in a mouldy room with little light, looking down into the gap between his window and the neighbour's dry wall, where the pine needles floated and composted. His resettled Bibles glittered all around him in their new space, their embossed spines collapsing sideways like pines, his dictionaries and arcana on archaeology, the Kalane, the ruins in Mesopotamia, Encyclopedia Britannicas, tracts and treatises, transliterations of the scriptures, and assorted pulmonologica by self-appointed reverends. His writing stacked beside his typewriter that had stopped its clattering. He called across the pathway when he saw Claire Mary rushing. "Ah, Claire Mary," he said, in his tape-recording voice. He also practiced for his sermons. She blanched momentarily. "Would you like to bring me some tea?" We were a little uncomfortable at first to be together behind the long gland of his desk. He's leaning to one side in his armchair, as if sitting on a pea. I sit in one of the kitchen chairs arranged against a bookshelf with its stiff back. But as he begins to speak to me, he warms up like a pine cone and starts to swing slightly from side to side. "Now," he begins in his recording voice again, as he began when it was his time to speak, with a pause just afterwards so you could prepare your attention. Claire Mary hurries him in his tea. He talks about the Greeks, their Bible, the Jews. He talks about Paul, the impostor. He says Jesus was never a martyr. He says we came from the twigs of spaceships that landed and built the pyramids. He smokes through a filter like a long black knuckle. They drove carefully up past the carport, along the thorny pathway, up to the office, headlights flicked on. They parked beneath the pines. They murmured in small groups in brown suit pants and ties with light blue stripes, in makeup and high heels. A silver urn steaming on a table brought outside, soggy tea bags dumped in a saucer. They smoked and waited for the sermon to begin. He stood apart in the pearl of his dog collar, staring into the oily trees, rehearsing what he was about to say. He clutched his Bible in his right hand, the edges of its pages blushing. His fingers in his left hand fidgeted, rubbing against each other as if grinding fine salt. Poplars looked on with their oval faces. He comes out of the dark room where the red light bursts and clips his reading glasses from a case, looks at me above their thin gold rims, before he tilts the plate against the light to check it. I help John load the heavy reams of paper into the printing machines. He spikes a cog with oil, spreads more ink across a roller. Michael Marawatla always called me Bugs because of my two big front teeth. He's seated at the staple binder like a jazzman at his drums. His shiny wingtip works the kit. He stops to take a swig of his tea, wipes down the back of his bald head. John sometimes picks us up from school in his smudged printer's coat. He sits on a pillow so he can see out the dusty windscreen. He collects the post, parcels strapped with string, dumps them in the back of the van. His eyes are slightly yellow. The inside smells of cigarettes. He clutches the steering wheel tightly as he navigates the corrugations. Sweat is pouring softly down his forehead. Mr. Stradom. Mr. Stradom lived just up the road. He had 6 bull terriers with cruel, sharp noses. They dragged him along, straining on their chains like a 6-headed bull terrier bouquet. He had a wife too, who lived behind the quiet of the willows that hid their house. In a garden you could hardly see, steaming with flowers. Only once saw who I thought was Mrs. Stradom flash past in a car, a blur of colours, driving very fast as if she was rushing back indoors to be behind a veil of green. Once Mr. Stradom walked his bull terriers across the bottom of our plot, stepping over the barbed wire tangled beneath the icy blue gums. My dad went down to sort him out. He came back blushing with one cheek very red. We all went indoors. Things got worse between Mr. Stradom and my dad. Once we rode our horses a different way up towards the main road where the cars poured. Mr. Stradom roared his bucky down the dirt road towards us, speeding up when he saw how skittish they were. My dad swore, his horse siding. Mr. Stradom's bucky suddenly found its brakes, lights in swirling dust. His kids in the side seat looking pale. He got out. "Get down off that horse and I'll stuff you up," he shouted at my father, his airy arms, his fists like lumps. Tim. I guess I would have preferred a nag with slow heels, icicle ankles egged on. Instead, I got an ex-show jumper with a fiery mane and short neck. He could turn on a tikkie, as Ma sometimes said. Once he galloped up the paddock without me, my dad yelling, pull back." He tossed me light as a shirt over the gun-pole fence that maybe as a sign of mercy, he decided not to jump. I got it from the dirt, patted off my tracksuit pants hitched with devil durance and dust, looked at his startled eyes. There was no evil there, maybe like tin, shook with fear. Once I got my wish, the riding school's mare, a grey with swollen legs, got her stuck in the dam where she preferred to be, trying to do a U-turn. Judy up on the bank through her clenched teeth, hissing for me to kick with my waterlogged feldscoons. Another time I took Trigger out, the colour of rusted tin. A saddled fire. "Oh yes," he said and fled beneath me, as if he ran fast enough he might actually turn into tin. Once I fetched the milk. It was getting dark. The blue gums were ghosts, pedalled fast. I went once or twice. I went once or twice to Raymond Dodgen's house. He played cow patty fights with Dion. He had a friend up the road, Mark Hayes, who had a friend who raced BMX and even had sponsorship. He had all the outfits from the magazines with padded pants and elbows and see-through shirt with logos printed down the sleeves. He rode the best bike in the shop and left it tangled on the lawn as if he didn't really care. Raymond clapped and brought it in for him. Raymond took us back to his house to show us the bullfrog that lived in the bush by the emptied-out pool, where sticks and leaves and a tractor tire gathered at the bottom of the green rain. Bullfrogs are poisonous, Dion said knowledgeably, but teased it with his swimming towel anyway, twisting it into a cook sister and flashing it before its fangs. Then it got a grip and he yelped, panicking like a helicopter blade, swinging it round and round, I, giggling at the same time, with Raymond jumping and yelling, Satan, 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 like Dion's dad did when he cursed them. Then Raymond rolled up the garage door to show us the kudu carcass that dangled upside down like a trick mirror beside the parked car. My dad's making bull time, he explained in a matter-of-fact way. Raymond had an older but I forget his name. He was almost getting a beard, and I think had just got his call-up papers. He drifted in the background on his way to the kitchen. So Raymond let us quickly peek through a crack in his door at the scope centerfold pasted all over his walls, checking for the shock in our faces. Mrs. Dodgen always came to watch Raymond play tennis with her proud mole and sturdy shoes. She glared through the diamond mesh fence when he hit the ball too deep, clucked sharply, Raymond, as she called him when she was annoyed. Raymond looked sheepish. For lunch, she poured us chips from a packet on different colored plastic plates, and we drank down Oris in matching plastic cups with frayed edges. We raced our bikes at Raymond's house, ramping along the pathways in the charred felt, my rally rattling. We pushed the go-kart down the road at Mark Hayes. I watched them go through the dust, catching up. I baked in the sunlight, stepping through the thorn. The winter grass was warm and rising. We waited for our Mars with our skew bikes, their pedals muddy. Mr. Dodgen was an electrician and bobbed up the driveway in his van. After work, he sat on the berm with his big mustard moustache and stoked his little wooden pipe. Thanks.
Wow, thank you so much, Ellen. Thank you. It's just hearing you read, I'm fangirling a little bit now. I'm not gonna lie. I'm obsessed with your work. It's just, I love everything that you write. Actually, we are gonna go into the Q&A session now, but
Thank you.
I don't really have a question, but it's more of a comment. As you were reading these new poems, I felt that we were getting to know the people in these poems through their actions and your recollections of their actions. And I thought that you did that so well, and I felt that it was something so unique. So thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so if anybody has any questions, you can just go ahead and unmute yourselves. And yeah, you can go ahead. Ed?
Hey, Kirsten.
Hi.
Hey. Ellen, it's great.